So Night Drive then, what's it about? Well, it's a deceptively simple poem in many ways. We have the speaker driving through France and experiencing the environment. So smells here, what he can see here, um, um, and then what else he can see here, what's happening around him, and then finally a reflection on what he's seen and experienced, and how that seems to have changed him in some way, or made him think of things in a slightly different way. And he relates it to, I thought of you. Now, you was his wife or girlfriend at the time, I'm not sure which really, doesn't really matter, a loved one. And he says at the end that as he was driving through, all these ordinary things were happening which seemed to be new to him in a sense. There's a strange paradox between ordinariness and new, because it seems to me paradoxical that they seem to be contradictory. How can ordinary things be new? Because ordinary suggests everyday, and we therefore they can't be new because we experience them every day. But it's the kind of sense of renewal which he talks about down here. That's perhaps seeing things or experiencing things that you'd sort of forgotten about in a way, I suppose, and then seeing them in a new context and therefore experiencing them again almost. But he relates it not only to a new or renewal of that, of the familiar, but also to his loved one, because as he's driving along, he's thinking of her. She's a long way away on the border between Italy and France, and on the darkened sphere, the Earth. Europe is in darkness at the time because it's night time. And it says your ordinariness was renewed there. So he seems to be thinking of her at this other part of the world, perhaps experiencing similar sorts of things that he's feeling or experiencing. And in a sense, it's a kind of a love poem where her ordinariness is being celebrated, in the sense that he begins to appreciate her, perhaps, once again, has his appreciation for her renewed, in the same way that he's had these very familiar things to him, like hay and woods and combine harvesters and things that he would have known as a child and as a farmer or a farmer's son would have experienced, those very familiar smells and experiences and sensual experiences, that they, just like those things, his love has been kind of renewed in the sense that ordinariness is okay, ordinariness is comforting, and somehow comforting, I suppose, is the right word. Now, if we look at it stylistically, so stylistics is really what you're doing all the time, but it's a particular way of analyzing text by breaking it down into its various word classes and thinking about it in a sort of more objective way. So if I do this now for you, have a look here. Just looked at categorized the words, the main words that carry meaning, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. And if you look at the nouns, the mainly concrete nouns, with the ones in red being abstract nouns. Ordinariness, of course, is important as an idea rather than a thing, and is therefore twice, and now in it twice, and therefore foregrounded. And I think it's foregrounded in another way, in that it's an unusual word. We don't use it very often. Ordinary we use, but not ordinariness. And fulfillment. Fulfillment seems to be an important idea in the poem to me, that he feels fulfilled by this very simple journey and that fulfillment is what's the word I'm looking for? That fulfillment seems to be linked to a fulfilling relationship, I suppose, when he talks about his wife or girlfriend. Okay, so going back to these, when you take those nouns and you put them in a little list over here, and you say, well, how could we categorize them? What do they refer to? Well, look at those related to nature and those related to man or mankind. And ordinariness is interesting because it's at first related to nature, and then there's the link. It's related to mankind then, and that link between the ordinariness of nature and the ordinariness of his relationship or his girlfriend and wife is important because that's what the whole thing's about. But it's mainly dominated by humans, human beings, isn't it? And human things like towns, machines, cafes, things like this. Where there aren't obviously lots of nature in the poem, I think, but more specifically humans. Now, if you look at a different poem, like Death of a Naturalist, you'll see, as you can see here, the nouns here I've highlighted in yellow. They're very, very dominated by nature. After you get past, I suppose that's nature, then you get past the very beginning. We've got sods, sun, blue bottles, bubbles, gauze, sound, smell, dragonflies, butterflies, slobber, water, spring, jam, potfalls, frogs, spawn, shade, banks, all referring to nature. Now when you get to this second part, or this part here, when he sort of takes it into school, you'd expect some change because he's talking about school, which is basically a man-made thing. We've got shelves, we've got school, we've got Miss Walls, but then everything else, all these are all nature. And that natural domination, or the domination of nature in terms of the nouns, choice of nouns, continues. And we've got fields, day, cow dung, grass, frogs, hedges, flagstone. It just continues. So when you compare that in terms of its with Night Drive, nature is there but doesn't dominate. Now if we have a look at what those things are doing, so we were thinking verbs now. So the smells of ordinariness were, you on the Night Drive, rain and hay and woods and the air made, warm drafts, signposts whitened, they were promised, came and went, they granted something, well, its name's fulfillment, combine groaned and bled, smouldered, shut, thought, made, was. Okay, so I think those are the verbs. Now one critic, as you can see down here, wrote of this poem, he was thinking of earlier work and how the writers moved on. In Night Drive, for instance, the natural world is no longer so callous and unmerciful. It is in fact benign and nurturing. That sense of in the natural world now being something more, as it says, nurturing and benign. So now we look at Death of a Naturalist again. Look at these verbs in grey: festered, rotted, weighted, sweltered, gargled, and then later invaded, docked, pulsed, hopped, farting, sickened, clutch. The things, the nature, in this case it's because it's dominated by nature, are doing things. These are all very dynamic verbs, but they're doing fairly unpleasant things. The verbs are generally negative and threatening, whereas here they're much more benign. So there's something in, we think about the verbs now in more detail. Think about the word made, which suggests something creative perhaps. Whitened, it's quite innocent, white, nothing threatening about it, at least anyway. Promised, and also granted. Now you think of the connotations of granted, and if you look the word up, you'll find a synonym for granted. If you grant something, you're generally doing it. It's a kind act, isn't it? To grant something, it's a benign, kind, nurturing sort of act, and it leads to, in this case, fulfillment. These are slightly different. We've got groaning and bled, which we'll come back to in a minute. Smouldered and shot again. Well, you could argue, I suppose, negative, but not really, I don't think, not compared with the death of a naturalist. Laid its loin, certainly sexual image, and that takes us back to this. We talked about ordinariness and how he says that his wife or girlfriend, his ordinariness is renewed there. You think about what this combine is doing. It's groaning, it's bleeding. Now, you may not agree, or you may find this disturbing, but it shouldn't be really. I think there's a sense of female sexuality, or female physiology at least, in the sense of bleed, which I think is sort of menstrual. Groaning perhaps something to do with sex, because you certainly get a sexual image here, and possibly to do with pain. I mean, menstruation can be associated with pain, or even childbirth. But he often uses female fecundity. Well, fecund, if you're fecund, that means you are fertile. It's fertile. And there's a certain fertility in these natural images, because what a combine harvester is doing is harvesting the earth. So therefore, everything comes from nature, doesn't it? And so the earth is, in this case, being fecund and fertile. So another aspect we can look at, as you know, is phonology at the language level. And it's not as sort of obvious in this poem as many others, but there's a sense of how it's different. It's not as noisy a poem, I don't think, as many of the others as well, certainly the early ones. But so, for example, if we look here, we compare it with a noisier poem like Death of a Naturalist. The sounds of in a poem like this is very, very important, because he wants to make it noisy. He's trying to make a very rich, busy, natural environment that really is so full of life. Then the sort of sounds reflect that. So look at phrases like gargled delicately, and sweltered in the punishing sun, and dragonflies spotted butterflies. All these phrases here, they tend to be multi-syllabic words. So something like delicately. How many syllables in that? Delicately is 4. And so it's a multi-syllabic word. It has more than one syllable. And that's the true of butterflies, spotted, dragonflies. Lots of multi-syllabic words altogether. Words are, as you know, exploited for their sounds. Slobber, clotted. You have to work hard. Your mouth has to work hard. If you try and read this poem out loud, you'll find that it's heavy on consonant sounds. With multisyllabic words, inevitably there are more sounds, but lots of consonant sounds all need pronouncing carefully. Now, if you look at the other one, and then think about some of the sounds here. Say here, rain and hay in the woods on the air made warm drafts in the open car. Now that's 2 syllables. Everything else is monosyllabic. which lends the whole poem, I think, a more gives it more a measured and perhaps thoughtful feel, rather than this frenetic activity we saw in the other poem. It's just not as busy in the way it sounds. And these rather open vowel sounds, rain and hay and woods on air, car, and drafts, war, maid. There's lots of open vowel sounds. Which fits in with the whole sort of benign, harmless nature and nurturing sense of nature in this poem that I've mentioned before. These L sounds also run through the poem, and they're all leading to this part here, laid its loin on France, I think. And late, light, small, smells, relentlessly, fulfillment. All these liquid L sounds. Are quite sort of give a relaxed feel to it, which would fit in with this journey he's making, where everything seems to be going well and it's going as it should in a way. And that, I think that comes to this line here in terms of its meaning. Each place granting its name's fulfillment. Now that means mountain, as we know, mont. And then we've got a place with a village with an abbey in it. And then we've got what could be translated as a beautiful view. And so what he's saying is, yes, this place is beautiful. It does have a beautiful view, so it's doing what it says on the tin. Its name's fulfillment is, well, its name is being fulfilled in the way it is. There is an abbey there, and it is a village, and it is on a mountain. So all those things suggest something just happening as it should, with no problems, as it were. And in the rhythms also in the poem, you can feel, for example, here, as he's driving through these places. If you've ever been through France, you'll know that when you come to a town, there's a sign, as you'd expect, with the name of the town on it as you enter the town. And they're all the same, they're all white with a black writing, and I can't remember, I think it's a red outline, I'm not sure. They're all the same size. And then, as you leave the town, the same sign is there, except that it's got a red line through it like that to say you're leaving the town, to let you know that that's the end of that particular place. And so there's a sense of rhythm to it. You know, there's lots of countryside, then a town. You come in, you see the sign as it whitens with the headlights, and then you leave it again as you see the lines are gone, and then another one. And so there's a definite sense of kind of a rhythm to this drive. He's driving a long way, and he keeps coming across these towns, and there's a sense in which it's all happening smoothly and correctly. And so that is reflected in the rhythms here. Montré, Abbeville, Beauvais. So like Montré, so weak strong, Abbeville, Beauvais. And so they're all this repeated rhythm. And we can hear it here again. We're promised, came, and went. We're promised, came, and went. You hear the rhythm. Weak strong, weak strong, weak strong, weak strong. Now, this isn't a poem that has a particular rhythmical form all the way through, but he does exploit rhythm to create this sense of a very ordered journey where everything is happening as it should, and in this benign way where the place seems to kindly grant its name's fulfillment for him as he drives through. So another aspect we can look at, of course, is the structure of the poem. First of all, we might look at the whole poem, how it looks on the page. It looks fairly neat, and I think this is because we've got 4 quatrains, which is 4-line stanzas as a quatrain, and there's 4 of them, which is all quite neat. So it's a fairly structured poem now, since it also has half rhyme, which runs consistently all the way through. Half rhyme rhymes that don't quite work, also sometimes called para-rhyme. Nearly rhymes. So look at this, ordinariness, France. We have consonants at least, as the same consonant sound. Air, car. You've got monosyllabic words here, similar, not quite, because the vowel isn't quite the same. Relentlessly, beauvais, e-a, went, meant, that's quite a good rhyme. Late, light, again we've got consonants in the T's and the L's, but we haven't got the same vowel sound. Out, shut, similar. Continuously, Italy, that's quite a good one. And then we've got sphere there. So it's half rhyme or para-rhyme all the way through. So it is quite a structured, it has quite a structured feel to it. And there's not particular lines that are on their own or isolated, or there's not particular words isolated. It's all fairly sort of neat on the page and fairly structured. And that would fit in with a sense of really quite a content feel to the poem. It's quite a contented poem. It's a love poem. And the drive through France seems to be fairly pleasant, and there seems to be no conflict in particular in a poem as we've been comparing with Death of a Naturalist, where there's a sense of fear and violence and all that kind of stuff bubbling up. We don't get it in this poem. But it's not entirely benign. There is some negativity, and I think there's a sense in which this seems really rather nice, and so does this. But then here we get this sense of almost of something a little negative, because you have this sense of pain and groaning and bled. And then we have here this forest fire is smouldered out. Something's going out, something's dying. And one by one, small cafes shut, as if the writer's being shut out of something. And they, it's no surprise that these 2 lines come together and that we have the para-rhyme to link them. Forest fires smouldered out, one by one, small cafes shut. A sense of sort of negativity here before the final stanza, where the sort of point of the poem comes at night or to view. So everything's good, things get a little negative, and then he thinks of her. Now, what I don't know, and this is speculation, I don't know what was in his mind, obviously, and he wouldn't want us to either. But the idea, I think, could be, perhaps, is there a sense in which there's the relationship has begun to get a bit old. This sense of smouldering out is a sort of loss of, I don't know, initial sort of sexual passion, and that as a relationship gets older, those things become, the first flush of love is sort of lost slightly. But as he's driving through, he is thinking all these good things and all these negative things, but he's thinking of her continuously. So that sounds quite positively. Where he says then finally her ordinariness was renewed. Now the question is, where is there? And as I'm sure you've worked out, we have deixis here, or a deictic expression, because we can't work out, because unless he points to a map, which he isn't doing, where there is. So there's two possibilities. I thought of you continuously 1,000 miles, blah blah blah, and your ordinance was renewed there, and could be renewed in Italy, where she is. But I don't know. It seems to me that he probably means a bit of both, actually. But the other possibility is that because there's a full stop here, which seems to take us to the end of that source. Your ordinariness was confused there where I was, as I thought of you continuously, and where he was is on his night drive through France. So if you read it that way, he says, I was thinking of you, I thought of you continuously, and there you were. Your ordinariness for me was renewed there on my night drive through France. So that's the sort of two ways of reading that, because of the deixis there. And I think that's deliberate. I'm sure it's deliberate, to create this sort of ambiguity. Which means it's ambiguous, it's not clear. So this lack of clarity, this ambiguity, carries with it both meanings at the same time. That for him, her ordinariness was renewed as he travelled through France and began to realise that the same things happening to him will be happening to her, the same very ordinary everyday experiences, the same sensual experiences of smells and sights and all those things he describes. And there's a sort of certain comfort in thinking of her 1,000 miles away, still going through those same, or having those same experiences continuously like he does. So, but also at the same time, perhaps if she, with her time away from him, is having a similar experience, and therefore in her time in Italy is also having this sense of ordinariness, or the wonder of, and just the sort of comfort of ordinary things happening to her as well. And I think that's why we've got this deixis here, and why that poem ends in that way. So then, to sum up Night Drive, it may be useful to have a look at what somebody else has said about it, and this critic is talking about the poem here, and he or she says, and I can't remember who it is, it doesn't really matter, a number of the poems in this volume, and this volume by which they mean Door into the Dark, are simply musings on travels in Ireland and on the continent. At first it is easy to pass over these pieces because the simple, undramatic language and quiet tone do not attract much attention, and I think in our comparison with Death of Naturalist, there certainly is a sense in which this is a much more understated poem than that one and some of the others. In fact, however, these meditations are extremely important in the evolution of Heaney's poetic orientation, for they document his growing awareness of place as a determinant of sensibility. Now, have a look at sensibility and what it means. We can very cleverly do this, as you know. And it's deep feeling, emotional response. Okay, so the idea here being that this sensibility is very much informed by place, in that as a poet, it wouldn't surprise you, having read a lot of his poetry, that place and place names and where you're from and your formative experiences are very, very important, and inform his poetic sensibility. For Heaney, a person's surroundings, particularly the environment of his or her growing up years, become the context to which he or she instinctively refers new experiences for evaluation. So when in the poem he talks about the ordinariness seeming new, he's obviously recognizing, as we said before, something in his past, something from this environment by which he now judges everything else. They become the norms of his consciousness, the images from which the individual forms values. So your values, or his values at least, according to him, will be formed by his early experiences. Now, this is a different poem in the same In Door into Dark. In The Peninsula, for example, the persona spends a day touring the scenes of his youth. He discovers upon return that he still has nothing to say, but he realizes that henceforth he will uncode all landscapes by this. Uncode. Interesting, isn't it? If you crack a code or uncode something, it becomes clear. So it's not clear, and then once you've cracked the code, it becomes clear. So wherever he goes, he seems to be in this, always referring back to where he's from. In Night Drive, specifically, the speaker driving through France and thinking of his love in Italy finds his ordinariness renewed by simple things such as signposts, and realizes that the same thing is happening to her. Environment forms and frames consciousness. So the importance of place, wherever he is or has been as a writer, is obviously very important in this poem and virtually every poem he ever writes. So there we have it, Night Drive in all its glory. I hope that's useful to you. Don't take my word for it. Look through this. Now you can always pause it and make notes and go back and listen to things again. And do so, please. And make your own judgments and think about it for yourselves. And there will be things that I've missed out. There will be things that you may not agree with, but try and think them through and make sure you've got evidence for your thoughts. Best of luck with that.